Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Are you not being entertained? Hi everyone, I'm Sawtooth Frank, and you're listening to the Soft Serve podcast. And on this episode, I am going to talk to you about the blizzard of 2026, and then I'm going to talk to you all about the amazing, fascinating, intriguing world of apples. You're going to hear all about this after the intro music.
The Soft Serve Podcast.
Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. No creepy truck. No absolute zero music. It's because I forgot to hit the correct button for you, and I am lazy, and I don't want to redo the intro, so you'll get the old intro music. Hi everyone, it's me, your old pal, Sawtooth Frank, and you're listening to the Soft Serve Podcast. Well, I don't know about you or where you live, but here on the East Coast, we just had what is being referred to as the blizzard of 2026. I live in Western Massachusetts. Okay, about 2 hours west of Boston town. And I think we got somewhere close to between, depending on where you live out here, 12 inches and 2 feet. I think at my house we got somewhere around 18 inches, something like that. But I feel like we're being punished. During last week's episode, I was complaining about winter and the snow and all of the shoveling that I've had to do. And I feel like the universe was responding to my podcast episode. And the universe said to me, you know what, Sawtooth? Go fuck yourself. You think it's bad? What I've done to you so far? Well, here, why don't you take this? Deal with this, Sawtooth. Anyways, it was pretty awful. And the whole East Coast from Maine down to, I think down as far as Virginia got slammed with this blizzard of 2026. Now, my daughter, who I talk about sometimes on the podcast, Space Unicorn, who is 15, was in Washington, D.C. doing some political lobbying. That's pretty impressive when the kids are doing stuff like that. Let's give her one of these. And she and the group she was with got stranded in Washington, D.C., if you can believe that. They were supposed to fly out on Monday night, but their flight got canceled, so they booked an alternative ride back on the following day, which would be Tuesday, and their train got canceled. So the group they were with had to charter a private bus to get all the way back from Washington, D.C. to Massachusetts. So as I record this right now, my dear space unicorn is en route back to Western Massachusetts, somewhere in Pennsylvania. Not Transylvania. Pennsylvania. Transylvania might be fun. That place is filled with vampires. That was my attempt at a Romanian accent. I did some accents on last week's episode. I did an Irish accent, a Canadian accent, a Scottish accent, and this week I'm trying to do a Romanian accent. Come here, I am a vampire. Vampires drink blood. Look into my eyes. I will hypnotize you and drink your blood. There you go, folks. That's my Romanian accent through the character of a vampire. Okay, so anyways, I've been the last 2 days dealing with this blizzard. Just this morning, I finished shoveling out my property. So luckily, I managed to get a new snowblower, and that worked just fine. And it made mincemeat out of the 18 inches of snow. So that was good. But then I had a lot of shoveling to do. So, you know, my house is a split level home, right? And so I actually have 4 roofs on my house, if you can believe it. And so a lot of gutters and downspouts. And one of the things I like to do after a snowstorm is shovel out the gutters and the downspouts. That helps get water away from the house once it starts warming up and thawing, so it doesn't go into the basement. I don't want to have flooding in my basement. So it's a lot of friggin' work. And luckily my 18-year-old Ted came home from college. He lives within driving distance. So he was here in case we had a emergency and I needed any, younger muscle. But I didn't need any, actually, so it was fine. And I kind of try to look at snow shoveling as exercise, because I haven't been to the gym in the last 3 weeks since I got sick. I got a cold. So I am feeling better. I don't feel like I have the cold anymore. I don't know if you can tell in my voice, but I feel like I sound better anyways. But I do have my tea. I have a hot tea here to sip on because my throat is getting a little phlegmy. I also just ate dinner as well. So hold on. I'm going to take a sip of tea. You just hang on 1 second there. You can listen to me sip this tea, okay? How was that? Not too horrible, I hope. Look, I'm human just like you are, okay? My throat gets phlegmy, gets scratchy, and there's nothing like a nice cup of tea. Now, this is a herbal tea from Trader Joe's, and it's an herbal tea that's designed to taste like coffee. It has no caffeine in it. It's like an herbal tea coffee replacement beverage sold by Trader Joe's. They have such cool shit there. I've never seen that stuff there. So, well, I should say I've never seen this stuff anywhere else. Well, that's not true. Celestial Seasonings, they sell like a coffee replacement tea, I think. I forget what it's called. It's like Thunderstruck or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, I've only seen this at Trader Joe's, really, that I can remember. Who knows? I'm sure other companies make this kind of crap. So, anyways, that's what I'm drinking tonight, is a herbal tea that's designed to be a coffee replacement. All right, so, yeah, so this winter absolutely fucking sucks. Gonna be honest with you. Thankfully, I don't think there are any other gigantic storms on the horizon. We've had enough snow. I don't want any more. And I'm saying this as a person who is sort of predisposed to like the cold. I do like the cold. I like being out in the cold air. I like moving around in the cold air. Even though, as I've gotten older, my cold tolerance is beginning to diminish a bit. I still don't mind the cold and feel very comfortable in it. I think I mentioned before, I'm of Norwegian and Scandinavian. Well, are those the same? Yeah, I'm of Scandinavian descent and Northern European descent primarily. So I'm sort of, I think, designed by nature to thrive in the cold. So anyways, but even with that sort of predisposition towards the cold, I'm done with winter. No more winter. Go away, winter. Bye-bye. See ya. Don't want to be ya. Get the fuck out of here. Bring on spring. Please. All right. Speaking of spring, right? Spring is when stuff starts growing again, right? And I said in the intro I was going to talk to you about apples. Now, this may seem kind of strange to you. Why am I going to talk to you about apples? Well, it's a bit of a long story. Well, not that long, but I'll try to tell it in a succinct way that's not totally annoying. Hold on, I'm going to clear my throat. Okay. So I've started eating more apples in my diet. Right? I think they're good for you. Right? As the common knowledge goes. Right? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. I think there's some truth to that. They're a nutrient-dense, low-calorie snack. They're full of fiber, right? They help keep things working regularly. So, sort of in my largely failing effort to eat healthier, because I'm gaining weight this year, I'm not losing it, I have been able to commit to eating healthier in respect of having a couple of apples a day. Now, they have not kept the doctor away. I will tell you that. I've been seeing specialist after specialist for all sorts of problems. The knuckles on my fingers have been swelling up. I've been seeing a rheumatologist for that. I see a urologist for my enlarged prostate. I went to a dermatologist to get some spots looked at. Right, I'm a mess. Right? So these apples are not keeping the doctor away. Now, maybe I haven't been eating them long enough. Right? To see the effect of keeping the doctor away, but I'm trying, folks. I'm trying. So, I may or may not have shared with you all, my dear listeners, that every week, or nearly every week, there are exceptions, I get together with 3 to 4 of my friends. These are a group of guys that some of them I met in nursery school, believe it or not. Right? It's a long fucking time ago. Some I met later in my life. And we get together every Friday night to play video games. That's sort of my thing, right? That's my regularly occurring social activity that I do with people outside of my family. I don't do much else, to be honest. Another sip of tea, sorry. Please bear with me. I apologize. So I shared with my friends that I was eating more apples. I thought this would be an interesting thing to tell them about. Now, I don't know about your friends, but my friends are not, well, how do I want to say this? In their typical, incredibly supportive way, when I shared this information with them, that I was eating more apples, and specifically, I shared with them that I was eating green apples. Now, until recently, I thought I hated green apples. Okay, so I thought this was an interesting thing to share with my friends. I said, hey guys, look, I have discovered that I, in fact, like green apples, and I have begun eating one green apple a day and a red apple a day. Right? And in their typically supportive way, my friends immediately accused me of becoming a, quote, apple guy, end quote. And they said this was going to be my newest thing. That my personality is that I'm predisposed to always having a thing that I get into. And that apples are now my thing. And that everything I do is going to be focused on apples. And so I said to them, okay, you sons of bitches. So I'm going to do an entire podcast episode about apples, if that's how you're going to be. If you're going to accuse me of being an apple guy, if you're going to accuse me of having apples as my thing, then I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to do an entire podcast episode focused on apples. So here we are. I'm doing an episode about apples. Well, blizzards and apples, I should say, because I did talk about the blizzard of 2026 at the beginning of this. So, after being accused of becoming an apple guy and that apples were now my thing, I thought about, well, what could I talk about apples? Right, and my friends were throwing out all sorts of ideas, and most of them were terrible ideas, I have to say. So I went sort of to the drawing board and thought about what would be some fun things I could talk about apples. Now, I could talk to you a little bit more about how I rediscovered green apples. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not kidding, I really thought I hated them. I've been walking around for years, like 10, 15, 20 years, thinking that green apples made me nauseous. That they made me sick to my stomach, and that I didn't like them because of that. Well, you know, one morning, my daughter, Space Unicorn, loves green apples. And, you know, in the last couple of weeks, there was a day we ran out of red apples, and all we had was green apples. And I really, really, really wanted to have an apple. So I said, you know what? I'm going to try it. I'm going to try a green apple. So I did. I picked it up. I looked at it. I rotated it around, examined it from all angles. I brought it up to my nose. I smelled it. And then I took a bite. A big bite. And I was delighted. It was not overly sweet. It was not too sour. The texture was like nice and firm and crisp. It was very refreshing. And in that moment, I said to myself, oh my God, I like green apples. And, I said this, though, sort of with a note of caution, because I was worried I might get sick to my stomach. If these green apples really upset my stomach, like I thought they did. So I waited a few minutes. Nothing happened. Waited, an hour went by. I didn't get sick to my stomach. I said, you know what? I'm going to have another green apple. So I ate one of those. And it was just as enjoyable as the first green apple. And I didn't get sick to my stomach after the second apple. And so after that trial of the green apple, I decided I can eat green apples. How exciting is that? How excited for you? How excited for me are you? I'm now a green apple guy. I'll also eat red apples too, but anyways. So I am an apple guy. Fuck my friends. I'm going to embrace my identity as an apple guy, okay? I like apples. So now I'm going to tell you some stuff about apples, okay? So we're doing the podcast about apples, and I'm going to tell you some things. And what do I want to tell you about apples? Well, I think we should start with the top 10 historical facts about apples, okay? We're going to learn something about apples together, I think. Hold on, let me take a sip of my tea. Okay, we're going to learn a little something about apples together. All right, so I'm going to read off some historical facts about apples. 10 facts about apples. Okay? Now, you may not have known this. I certainly didn't. Apples originated in Central Asia, specifically back to the forests of what we now know as Kazakhstan. Okay, and there is a wild species of apples that still grows there today. The name of that species is called Malus severicil. I don't know exactly what that apple looks like or what it tastes like, or if you could even eat a wild apple, but that's where apples are from. Kazakhstan. Who knew that? I didn't know that. Okay, another historical fact about apples is that apples, they spread westward out of Central Asia along the Silk Road, which is an ancient trade route. And as traders moved between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, apple varieties began to cross-pollinate sort of naturally in creating the different varieties and genetic diversity of apples that we see today. All right, so apples, they made their debut on the world stage because they went along the ancient trade route called the Silk Road. Now, this next fact is really interesting. The Bible has a story about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And God being like, hey, look, I have a forbidden fruit that grows in the Garden of Eden, and you can't eat it, right? Because if you eat it, you're going to gain self-awareness and knowledge, and your life's going to be fucking miserable. So Eve was like, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to go find the forbidden fruit, and I'm going to eat of it. And that's exactly what she did. Now, a lot of depictions of this event in the Bible show the forbidden fruit being the apple. But the book of Genesis, where that story is, never specifies that the forbidden fruit was an apple. Okay? That's pretty interesting, right? And we have lots of art from the medieval European era of art that depicts Eve eating apples in the garden, or taking a bite out of an apple in the Garden of Eden. And that sort of, sealed the apple's fate and reputation as being the forbidden fruit. But there's no evidence of that. The apple has sort of been unfairly maligned as the source of, I think, what's known as the original sin, which was disobeying God's order and eating of the forbidden fruit. So there's no evidence the forbidden fruit was an apple. That's what I'm trying to tell you, okay? That's a fact. Let's see. The ancient Greeks, they had a thing for apples too. They frequently associated apples with love and war. So in Greek mythology, you have this thing called the golden apple of discord, which helped spark the Great Trojan War. Okay, and also apples were also associated with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. Okay, so sort of thematically, apples are the fruit of romanticism and catastrophe, which is kind of interesting. Let's see. Another fact is that the Romans loved apples, and they helped spread them across Europe. So the Romans, they grew a lot of apples. They cultivated them. And one of the things they did was, because they were geniuses in a lot of ways with engineering, they helped improve the grafting techniques for apple trees. Right? And that's a process where you take a cutting of an apple tree that is producing apples you like, and you literally fuse a branch from that tree onto another apple tree to grow the kind of apples you like. Right? Because apparently you can't, I don't know, there's something with the way apples reproduce where you can't take an apple and plant the seed and get the apple you want from it. I don't know. I'm not a fucking horticulturist or a appleologist, so I don't know how all this fucking works, but trust me on this. Okay, the Romans helped spread apples throughout Europe, right? And they are responsible for a lot of the apple orchards that we see throughout Europe. Okay? So this is interesting. If you are listening to this and you reside in the United States of America, okay? Colonial Americans, okay? These motherfuckers drank more apples than they ate. When European settlers arrived in North America, they mostly planted apple trees so that they could make hard cider, not eat them. Right? And it's not just because colonial Americans were a bunch of raging alcoholics, which they were, but water was not really safe to drink all the time. And hard cider, because it has a high alcohol content, kills off bacteria that might grow inside of it. So that was safer to drink than water. Also, one of the reasons why people, drank beer and traveled across the oceans with beer and wine and spirits. Because it doesn't go bad, really. If the alcohol content is high enough in it, it keeps better. Not that it doesn't go bad. It will eventually go bad, but it keeps better. Excuse me. All right. Let's see. Johnny Appleseed. We've all heard of Johnny Appleseed, right? Well, the fact of the matter is he was a real person. His name was John Chapman, and he traveled across the American frontier in the late 1700s. Right, so right around the time of the founding of the United States of America. And throughout the early 1800s, planting apple nurseries. The popular image of Johnny Appleseed is of this guy skipping through the countryside, dipping his hand into a sack and throwing seeds all over the place. He didn't really do that. He was not running around and scattering random seeds wildly. He was strategically setting up and planting orchards for settlers. Mostly so they could make hard cider for drinking. So thanks, Johnny Appleseed, for starting our country off on its road to becoming a nation full of alcoholics. Appreciate that. Okay, another apple fact is apples don't grow what they call true from seed. Okay, so this is what I was saying before, and I'll admit I don't fully understand this, but if you take a seed from, let's say, a Honeycrisp apple, and you plant it, you will not grow a Honeycrisp apple tree. Okay? Every single apple seed out of an apple produces a genetically unique tree. Right? So that apple you're holding with like 7 or 8 apple seeds in it, every one of those seeds is going to produce a different type of apple. Right? And that's why commercial apple trees are grown through the process of grafting I was telling you about before, right? So they take cuttings off of a already grown tree that's producing apples of a specific type, and they graft those cuttings onto what they call a rootstock, or like a growing part of an apple tree. And so that apple tree kind of grows up because it's covered with grafts to produce the apples that you like of one variety. That's kind of fucked up. I guess it makes sense. Like if you ever drive by an apple tree orchard and you look at the trees, you'll see they all look fucking twisted and gnarly. Right? That's because of the grafts on the tree. Huh. That's so interesting. All right, another fact is there used to be thousands and thousands of more varieties of apples. Right? By the 1800s here in the United States, we had thousands of different names of different types of apple varieties. Right? But today, many of those are gone and they've faded into sort of agricultural history. Right? The commercial markets today for apples are dominated by, just a few different types of varieties. And you probably know these names like Red Delicious, Granny Smith. Granny Smith is a green apple. And there are some newer varieties out there like Honeycrisp, which I like. I have a bag of those sitting up in my kitchen right now. Um, there's another new variety out that I really want to try that's apparently really good called Cosmic Crisp. You imagine that. Cosmic Crisp. I want to get my hands on one of those. I don't know where to get it. A friend of mine, one of my gaming pals, he was telling me he has Cosmic Crisp apples. I got to ask him where he got those. Okay? And then the last fact I'll tell you about apples, okay, is that they are one of the oldest cultivated fruits in humanity. Okay, we've been growing these motherfuckers for at least 4,000 years that we know of. Okay, so from the Central Asian forests of Kazakhstan, we talked about that at the beginning, to the Roman orchards, right? From medieval monasteries to our American cider mills. Apples have been a constant and continuous part of human civilization, right? And there are very few fruits out there that can claim that sort of uninterrupted cultural and agricultural history that apples have. So bring it on, you motherfucking peaches. Okay? Parsnips. Come on, bring it. I don't think a parsnip is a fruit, though, is it? No, it's not. Well, a peach is a fruit. Watermelons are fruits. Pears. Fuck you, pears. You don't hold anything to the apple. All right, so those are some facts about apples, okay? And now let's talk about some weird facts about apples. Okay? Some of these might be repetitive of the other facts we talked about, but these are just some weird facts about apples. And I won't dwell on the ones that are repetitive, okay? So we talked about this. Every single apple you eat is a clone, right? Because remember, you can't plant an apple seed and get the same kind of apple that you're eating from it. So every apple you eat is a clone, right? That's done through the grafting process. Let's see. Early America was basically fueled on hard cider, right? Thank you, apples, and thank you, fermentation. We talked about this one. Forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden probably wasn't an apple. Now, I don't know what else it would have been, right? Where was the Garden of Eden? In the Middle East? I don't think anybody knows, do they? Does the Bible say? I don't know. I'm not a biblical scholar. Maybe the forbidden fruit was a banana. Maybe the forbidden fruit was a pomegranate. Maybe the forbidden fruit was a fig. Who the fuck knows? But it probably was not an apple. Okay? Let's see. Here's a weird fact about apples. Apples float, right, in water because they're 25% air. Right? If you ever seen children bobbing for apples on Halloween and they float, right? That's because a quarter of an apple is air. Okay? Let's see. Apple trees live longer than human beings. Yeah. Imagine that. An apple tree typically lives over 100 years. Okay, so you could be eating an apple that was planted, the tree was planted before you were born. And if you're an old person, that could be a long time ago. Let's see. Every time you bite an apple, you know how it crunches, that loud crunch? Here's another weird fact. That's because when you bite into an apple, it triggers a little explosion, right? That loud crunching noise is thousands of little plant cell membranes rupturing at once. So basically you're causing a microscopic structural collapse with your chompers. Delicious, delicious destruction. Okay, this is a weird fact. The largest apple ever was the size of a baby. Imagine that. In 2005, a Japanese grower harvested a record-breaking apple weighing over 4 pounds. That's not a snack, folks. That's a commitment. That's a meal. I mean, I don't even think I could eat an apple that was 4 pounds. I would take one look at it and run the other way. Okay, let's see. Let's see. All right, here's an interesting fact about Apple, the company, Apple Incorporated. Okay, that company chose the name Apple, right? Because they thought Apple sounded friendly to people. Like when people thought about apples, it was a good feeling that they had. And also that the word apple would appear before the word Atari in the phone book. So anyways, one of the most powerful technology companies in the history of the world is named after produce because it had an alphabetical advantage, right? And if there's any evidence of Steve Jobs' genius, there it is, folks. Okay? All right, here's another weird fact about apples, okay? A weird fact is that these little red and green motherfuckers mutate all the time. Okay, so some of our most famous apple varieties started because of a single random mutation on a single apple tree branch. Right? So picture the scenario. A farmer walks out into their orchard. They come up on a tree, they're checking it out, and they look at a branch and they see it's making one fruit that's a little bit different from all the other ones. Right? And they pick off one of those apples and they taste it and they're like, oh my God, this one tastes like nothing I've ever had before. This is the best fucking apple in the world. Right? So what they do, they snip off a piece of that branch, right? And they clone it onto a tree trunk. Then bingo bango, we have a brand new variety of apple. Right? So chances are your favorite apple variety might exist because it's a mutant. Right? The product of a freak botanical accident of the genes. How crazy is that? Anyways, okay? So those are some weird facts about apples. Okay? Weird facts. Which is kind of strange. Let's see. And then sort of the last thing I want to talk to you about apples, all right? About as just some interesting moments of apples in popular culture, right? We talked about this. Apples have been around a long fucking time, right? We all know about apples. We think about apples. Well, okay, I'm projecting the fact that I'm now an apple guy, and apples are my thing onto all of you, my dear listeners. You may not think about apples, I'll admit that, okay? But I don't think it's a branch too far to suggest that a lot of people think about apples, and apples are sort of ingrained into our lives, okay? And that seeps its way into our popular culture, right? Books, movies, television, songs, commerce, right? Popular culture. And honestly, with the advent of social media, the lines between all of those things I just named have started to blur, right? All right, so let's talk about some of the notable moments of apples in popular culture, shall we? Okay. All right. You remember that movie, The Wizard of Oz? Right? There's a scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy is on the yellow brick road. She comes upon an apple orchard and she is looking for directions, right, from the trees, right, who suddenly have become sentient. So she's asking them, which way do I go here? But they become incredibly aggressive, these trees. They don't seem to like Dorothy, and they start throwing apples at her, right? And then they start attacking her, right? So, and I think The Wizard of Oz was made in the early 1930s. It's like a really early movie. Certainly one of the first color movies, right? And that had vicious attacking apple trees in it, right? I remember that scene from being a child and being really scared of those trees. All right, that's The Wizard of Oz. Okay, you know this one, right? And I'm probably going to name the podcast episode this, in Good Will Hunting, right? Matt Damon gets into a disagreement with a Harvard-educated, stuck-up piece of shit when he's in a bar. And Matt Damon's character is like a janitor who also happens to be a genius, a mathematical genius. But he gets the phone number of a girl in the bar, right? And what does he say to the stuck-up prick? Right? He writes the phone number on a piece of paper and slaps it against the window of the bar. And he says something to the stuck-up piece of shit that he was fighting with. Do you remember? That's right. He says, "How do you like them apples?" Right? So there's another big moment for apples. Right, and I have to mention, I'll give credit to my friend, one of my friends that I play games with, and he's appeared on early episodes of this podcast under the name Vape Ape, and he did mention this moment as something like this moment in Good Will Hunting that I could talk about on the podcast. Okay, so I'll give him credit for that idea. Okay, Vape Ape, there you go. Not that you will ever listen to this, but let's give credit where credit's due. Okay, we're those kind of people here on the Soft Serve podcast. We give credit where it's due. All right, okay, the Beatles, right? the Beatles, the name of their corporation, right, was Apple Corp. Now, this would later lead to what is widely considered one of the pettiest corporate showdowns in history, when Apple Inc., I think, took issue with the fact that there was Apple Corp. But I don't know who won that dispute, or even if it was a dispute. Let me clarify this. I think this bears some clarification, so I'm gonna Google it. Let's see. Bear with me here. Let's type this in. Did Apple sue the Beatles? Okay. Let's type that in. Did Apple sue the Beatles? Okay, no, it was the other way around. So let me issue a correction. The Beatles company, and a correction and an apology to Apple. I was wrong. Okay, so let me correct myself. The Beatles company, Apple Corp., famously sued Apple Computer, now known as Apple Inc., multiple times over several decades regarding trademark violations. The legal battle began in 1978 and resulted in multiple settlements, most notably in 1991 and 2007, before the Beatles' music finally arrived on iTunes. Okay, so 1978 to 1981, the Beatles sued over the use of the Apple name. Apple Computer agreed to stay out of the music business and paid some money, blah, 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 on it goes. So, yeah, there were all sorts of legal disputes over this. All over the fucking name Apple. Okay? Jesus Christ, who knew a fruit could be so controversial? I guess you could say there were 2 giant apples and only 1 orchard for them to be in. All right, so let's see. Another popular culture moment for the Apple. We all know about William Tell's trick shot, right? I think this is the story of William Tell, who allegedly shot an apple off his son's head. And sort of became a symbol of extreme confidence, right? I mean, I know I grew up hearing about that and seeing, you still see people enacting and sort of playing out that whole thing, not with apples and arrows, right? But with other things, like people will put stuff on their head and other people will like shoot it off with something else, or like kick something off of somebody's head, or, throw something to knock something off somebody's head. But this is all related to the William Tell trick shot. Not that I know who the hell William Tell was. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who that is. Let's type that in, see who that is. William Tell. All right. He was an expert mountain climber and marksman with a crossbow, who assassinated Albrecht Gessler, a tyrannical reeve of the Austrian dukes of the House of Habsburg. Okay. Well, anyways, he's a legend because William Tell's a legend because he shot a fucking apple off his son's head with an arrow. Okay. That's who he is. All right. Other moments in popular culture for apples. We talked about Johnny Appleseed. We talked about him. Oh, this is a good one. Okay. Another one. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Any guesses? Where do you know? Come on. Tell me you know. Right? There's a poison apple in that movie. Right? the witch gives Snow White a poison apple. And if I'm remembering correctly, she bites the apple, she takes a bite of it, and she falls into a coma. Right? And then Prince Charming, I think it is. Does he have to come and kiss her to wake her up? Or is that Sleeping Beauty? What the fuck? What's the difference? Oh my God, I don't even know. All right, Snow White and the apple. Let's see. Yeah. The evil queen creates the apple to give her the sleeping death. But what happens? Dun, dun, dun. How does she wake up? Okay, what happened to Snow White? I don't know. I don't know who wakes her up. Well, if somebody knows who the fuck, does she wake up? What's the difference between Snow White and Sleeping Beauty? Does anybody know? Snow White versus Sleeping Beauty. Let's see. All right. Sleeping Beauty. I don't know. Jesus Christ. No, I think Snow White gets kissed and woken up after she eats the apple. I think. Or maybe they both get, maybe both. I don't fucking know. All right, I'm spending too much time on this. If you fucking know what happens, just somebody please tell me. I'm confused. I don't know. This is too much for me. Snow White versus Sleeping Beauty. I have no idea. So if somebody wants to clarify for this for me, that would be great. Thank you. This is why I wish sometimes I did these solo episodes live. And I had people listening I could at least ask. Right? Okay. Let's see. Popular culture. All right. Let's get through this. Okay. So New York City is referred to as the Big Apple. Okay. Don't know why. But if you can make it there, you can also become produce, apparently. Okay. Let's see. Apple Inc. We talked about that. The giant technology company, right? I have an iPhone. I have Mac computers. You know, in addition into being recently into the fruit Apple, I am also an Apple guy in the sense that I love Apple technology. Okay. Their logo is an apple. There we go. All right. And let's just say this. The last thing about apples, okay, is they're fucking delicious. We love apples. Oh, this is not the last thing I want to say about apples. Sorry. God, I doubt there's anybody even listening anymore. I think this has been too much about apples. Way too much. I'm looking at the clock. I see it's already 58 minutes. But so what I was going to say is apples are delicious, okay? We feed them to babies in the form of applesauce. We trust apples. We trust them with our children. Right? We love apples as a people, as a human people. And I think apples are, as I said earlier in this, they've been around human civilization as long as we've had it. So let's give one of these to apples, okay? We love apples. And if you don't like apples, well, I suggest that you look into that, okay? Now, interestingly, this gives me an opportunity, this whole podcast about apples and this conversation about apples, to read a poem I wrote many years ago now, 26 years ago, that has apples in it and features an apple orchard. So I'll read the poem and then I will tell you the story about the poem, okay? All right, so here we go. I'm going to read you this poem. It's called Royalty Runs in the Family, okay? And again, I wrote this back, I think, in the year 2000. In the year 2000. Okay? Here we go. Sorry. Oh, God. Worst podcast ever. Okay. Royalty runs in the family. One warm October evening, Great-Grandpa Jacob resigned himself to rule as King of the Apples. Young Princess Joyce, long live Queen Graham, found him hanging Tuesday morning on a stem of black twine. Graceful long swings of pendulum rhyme pronounced his monarchy. King Jacob was naked except for a crown. 10 red cortlands circled his head. No note on a table or tied to his toe. Only questions remained for his subjects to ask, and wait on answers that royalty refuses. Okay, that was my poem, Royalty Runs in the Family. And I wrote that poem after a conversation with my grandmother, whose name was Joyce, and her maiden name was Jacob, Joyce Jacob. She is Queen Graham, who is mentioned in the poem, and she shared with me this story, if I'm remembering it correctly, that I believe her father committed suicide by hanging himself from an apple tree. Right? And I was struck by the imagery of that. You know, sort of a body hanging there in an apple tree with a branch containing apples sort of resting over the corpse's head like a crown. That was the inspiration for that poem. That's crazy, right? All right. Well, that took a turn, didn't it? This episode about apples took a dark turn into an episode about a guy hanging himself in an apple tree. All right. Well, that's what it is, folks. 1 minute you're joyously snacking on a delicious apple, feeling the crisp, cool apple meat between your teeth, the juices running on your tongue, and then you bite into a fucking worm. Okay, and I'm sorry, my apple poem was the fucking worm in this apple episode. But that's how we do it here in the Soft Serve podcast, okay? We keep it real. Real slow and real dumb with really bad poetry. Okay. Well, folks, here's what I want to say to you. As always, thank you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. You know, we're a small group. We're a small family. You know, we are much diminished from the heyday of the Soft Serve podcast, but it's my own fault. I quit doing it. I lost the audience. And that's what happens. But you're here, okay? You're here. You're listening. I appreciate you. And I'm going to keep doing this as long as you keep showing up, okay? And as long as I feel like I want to do this, which is something I still want to do. How's that? Okay? So, if you're a new listener, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We even have a Substack. Sometimes I write essays and read them here. That's where I publish the essays. We're even on TikTok. Once in a while, I'll put up a TikTok. And you can leave a comment or send me feedback, okay, through the social media places. So Facebook, Instagram. You can DM me there, leave a comment. Okay, our website has a form you can fill out to give feedback. All right, so you can email me at softservepodcast@gmail.com. Always glad to hear from you, okay? And I sometimes read our listeners' feedback on the show. I try to work it in when we get it. All right? So, anyways, folks, you are the apple of my eye. And I will be your apple juice. All you have to do is squeeze me. Put me between two wooden boards. Turn your iron crank and squeeze me. And I will be your apple juice. And as I lay there between those boards, oozing sweet juice for you to drink in your cup, I'll look at you in the eyes, and I will say to you the thing that I always say right before the end. Bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.